Have you ever driven a Ford pickup truck, or really any vehicle, off a highway and onto a dirt road, only to feel the entire vehicle shaking so hard that it seems like every bolt is about to fall out? This phenomenon is known as a washboard road. But why does it happen? And why, after nearly a century of research, are engineers still struggling to completely eliminate it? Today on HiSimpleThings, we're going to find out. The name sounds almost funny, but the reality is far more interesting. From rural towns in Texas to the remote Australian Outback, to vast deserts across Africa. Wherever dirt roads exist, these strange ripples usually appear. And the craziest part is this: nobody creates them. No construction crews. No special machinery. No one intentionally shapes the road this way. A road can be perfectly graded today, and just weeks or months later, it can transform into a series of evenly spaced ridges. So what is really happening? And why, in 2026, when self-driving cars are already on the road and artificial intelligence is everywhere, do we still have roads that shake vehicles apart? Anyone who has driven on a dirt road knows the feeling. The vehicle vibrates constantly. Everything inside the cabin rattles. Steering becomes less precise. And over time, the suspension shocks, and tires wear out faster, but that's not the worst part. At higher speeds, the problem becomes much more serious. As the tires repeatedly bounce off the surface, traction decreases. That means longer stopping distances, reduced control, and a greater risk of losing control altogether. Many people assume this only affects remote areas. But that's not true. The United States has more than 4 million miles of public roads, and roughly 35% of them are still unpaved. Millions of people rely on these roads every day for work, transportation, and access to rural communities. Now here's something most people never notice. If you stop and take a closer look at a washboard road, you'll see that the ridges are surprisingly uniform. The spacing is often remarkably consistent. They can stretch for hundreds of feet, sometimes even miles. From a distance, it almost looks as if a giant machine carved them into the road with perfect precision, but there is no machine. The vehicles themselves are creating the pattern. It all starts with something incredibly small. Even a freshly graded road is never perfectly smooth. There are always tiny imperfections: a small rock, a shallow tire track, a slightly softer patch of soil. Most drivers would never even notice them. But when a tire rolls over one of these tiny bumps, the vehicle's suspension begins to oscillate. If the vehicle is moving fast enough, the tire may briefly lose contact with the surface before touching down again. It sounds insignificant, but that's where everything begins. When the tire lands, it strikes the road with slightly more force than normal. That impact pushes a small amount of dirt or gravel forward. A tiny ridge starts to form, and that's when the chain reaction begins. The next vehicle comes along, it hits that same ridge. The suspension oscillates again. The tire lands again. More material gets pushed forward. Each vehicle changes the road only slightly. But hundreds or thousands of vehicles can completely reshape it. Over time, those tiny changes begin to accumulate. The ridges become larger, more defined, more evenly spaced. And the larger they become, the more they cause vehicles to bounce. That creates a self-reinforcing cycle. Vehicles create ridges. Ridges create more bouncing. More bouncing creates even larger ridges. That's why washboard roads often develop faster on routes used by heavy trucks, pickups, and other large vehicles. Curves and transitions between paved and unpaved roads are also common places for them to form. At this point, the solution seems obvious. Why not just pave every road? The answer is cost. Many rural roads serve only a few dozen or a few hundred vehicles each day. Building and maintaining pavement across millions of miles of roadway would be enormously expensive. In many places, dirt roads remain the most economical option. Road crews can smooth them using graders. But here's the interesting part. Even after a road is flattened, the ridges often return weeks or months later, almost as if the road remembers its previous shape. And that's where the story becomes even more fascinating. This pattern doesn't only appear on roads. You can find similar shapes throughout nature. Sand dunes in deserts, ripples on riverbeds, patterns left behind on beaches after the tide recedes. All of them are formed through the same basic process. A force continuously reshapes a surface. The surface changes. And those changes influence the force acting on it. Wind creates dunes, water creates ripples, and vehicles create washboard roads. Humans have been studying this phenomenon for nearly a century. Yet even in 2026, researchers are still working to fully understand every factor involved. Vehicle speed, tire pressure, moisture levels, gravel size, vehicle weight. All of these play a role in determining whether a road develops washboard patterns. So the next time you're driving down a rough dirt road, remember, those ridges are not simply signs of a poorly built road. They're the result of thousands of vehicles, millions of tire impacts, and the same natural forces that shape rivers, deserts, and landscapes across our planet. And that's why one of the most common sights on Earth remains a fascinating engineering mystery today. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.